Everyone has their own opinions about cards and decks and the format, and in today's video I want to go through some of the controversial opinions that you guys sent me before I went to YCS Pasadena. And you sent me these on Twitter. I posted a tweet out there right before I left, and I said just post whatever controversial opinions that you have about Yu-Gi-Oh! And at the moment it has 230 replies. We're obviously not going to go through all of those, but I thought I'd just go through some of the top ones. And as we're going through these, just keep in mind that I will sort of give my opinion on these, but the whole point of the video is just to get as many as possible, and then you guys can kind of leave your own opinion in the comment section below, because as I've seen from many of the ones that I've already looked at so far, they are in fact controversial. They're not just obvious things like, oh, if someone said, wow, 2018 Yu-Gi-Oh! Has a lot more searching and extra deck mechanics than 2003 Yu-Gi-Oh! I think everyone could agree on that. But these are supposed to be controversial, kind of get you thinking about the game in general. So anyway, let's just jump right in. Team APS writes, Yu-Gi-Oh! Players claim to hate OTKs and unbreakable boards, but actually enjoy doing and talking about them as long as they're not on the receiving end. Every new archetype is judged on its ability to do either of these things, and the ones that can't get left behind. I think that I agree with this. I think it's not that crazy to think about. I think people do sort of complain about these OTKs and these FTKs and these huge boards, but whenever you see someone with some new cards, that's what they're trying to do. Even the people playing super casual decks, they don't want to just summon one monster. They want that combo that they don't hit every single time, but they want to make a huge board with the cards in their own archetypes. So I don't know, I'd love to hear what you guys think about that, but I think in general Team APS is right on the nose here. Nimnim says, without unreasonably unfair monsters like Firewall Dragon, Link monsters are the best thing to happen to Yu-Gi-Oh! In the last several years. This is a pretty controversial stance. I think a lot of people don't like Link summoning, just the idea of it. I'm imagining that many of the people that will watch this video do not like the idea of Link summoning, but I kind of agree. I made that video titled about why Link summoning exists in the first place, and one of the things that I mentioned that you guys have probably heard me talk about a couple times now is that I feel that Link summoning sort of opens up card design. If you wanted to make an extra deck based strategy, you either had to make all the monsters the same level or the same like 2 levels, maybe a deck has like level 3s and level 4s, or you had to give them a tuner and make them synchro summon, or you had to like give them fusion monsters and stuff like that. But with Link summoning, you can have decks like Gokis and Altergeist and Trickstars, and I know not everyone likes those decks, but from a design standpoint, it's kind of interesting that we have decks that have a variety of levels of monsters without any tuners, and they can still make extra deck cards. And I think Link summoning in general, as long as they fix a couple things, namely cards like Firewall Dragon and Gumblar Dragon, if they fix those, I think it'll be fondly remembered. But I think I'm afraid of Konami never hitting those cards, so Link summoning will just always be the Firewall Dragon mechanic, and that obviously won't look well in Yu-Gi-Oh! History. Kelly Locke writes, hand traps increase interaction, but that interaction is terrible. And I think a lot of people would agree with him there. I think I personally, I don't know if I say that the interaction is terrible. I think that hand traps are sort of like the solution, if to say, to like some of the issues that are currently in the game in terms of like those unbreakable boards that Team APS was mentioning. Because without hand traps, it feels really bad playing Yu-Gi-Oh! I think in Duel Links, I noticed this a lot, because for hires and Amazonists, they would pretty much just be crippled if you could actually have Effect Veiler in that game. Not too broken of a card, it's almost always a -1 in card economy, so it's a minus in tempo. It's just one of those cards that prevents your opponent from setting up a ridiculous board. So I think hand traps are sort of Konami's solution as the game goes on to some of their crazier cards. The problem becomes those cards, those hand traps, are particularly powerful against decks that aren't particularly powerful. So when you have hand traps against the more casual strategies, they're just so ridiculously overpowered relative to what those casual strategies can do. I think that's where we see that unevenness in hand traps versus other decks. GOAT format isn't interesting or fun. People just like it because it was a simpler time without crazy plays and insanely fast game speed. Pretty controversial opinion there. People do seem to really love GOAT format. I'm not a huge fan of GOAT format. You guys obviously haven't seen a ton of videos of me playing it. I do technically have a GOAT format deck. I think that's why GOAT format is so popular. It's cool just from a design standpoint to have a specific deck that a lot of people can buy for pretty inexpensive. If I mean, if some of the cards are a little expensive, but overall you can build a functioning GOAT format deck for like less than $100, and maybe if you cut some cards even less than $50. Many of the staples back then were reprinted like 100 times, so it's not super expensive. And I think what's cool is that in terms of playing old school Yu-Gi-Oh, if you talk to any random Yu-Gi-Oh player and ask them, do you have any old school decks, almost all the time, if they don't say no, they're going to say that they have a GOAT format deck. So while GOAT format might not be the best old school format, I think that it has to exist in a modern sense just because it's the go-to deck when people want to play old school Yu-Gi-Oh. Is it truly the best old school Yu-Gi-Oh format though? I don't know. I think a lot of people really like 2011 Edison format is a really popular one with like all sorts of decks are viable at that YCS. There's a lot of things that could be said about GOAT format, but I think that right now it's just so popular as the biggest old school format that people are just naturally going to be inclined to like it more because it's so different from modern Yu-Gi-Oh. Farfa says, every single continuous low to no maintenance cost card in the game that indefinitely prohibits your opinion from performing an action should be banned. Majesty's Fiend goes in, skill drain, soul drain, etc., etc. And I think he's hitting something that a lot of people feel, and I think that usually it's the more competitive players that feel this way. I'm kind of on the fence though. I know what he's saying, and what he's saying is that there's so many cards out there that prevent you from playing Yu-Gi-Oh, and it's very frustrating to play against. My counter argument to that would be that in the case of things like Anti-Spell versus Pendulums, Anti-Spell allowed a ton of rogue decks to actually have a chance against decks like Pepe, against decks like Metalfoes and Pendulum Editions, and I think that's good. I think it's a very delicate balance, and I think that what should be done is that I like it when Konami puts outs to those cards in the decks that they actually have a chance of drawing. For example, in Pendulum Editions, you could draw Purple Poison Magician that could out those back row, so you couldn't just flip an Anti-Spell Fragrance and win the game every single time like you could against some other variants. So I think that you need, once again, floodgates like hand traps are not fun to play against for certain strategies, but I think that floodgates are sort of the way that Konami deals with many of the top strategies. Things like pendulums are inherently nerfed just forever as long as Anti-Spell Fragrance is at 3 copies per deck, although I realize obviously I play a lot of trap-based strategies, and also I don't really play pendulums very much, so things like that are going to be a little bit more biased for me. But I think that is a pretty controversial stance. It seems like floodgates in particular, you have a group of people that doesn't mind them, a group of people that really hates them, and a group of people that really likes them. And I'm not sure quite where I fall in there, but I don't think I quite fall on the hating them aspect just because I play so many slower strategies. Mervo says Yu-Gi-Oh is better played casually with your friend. Taking the game too seriously kind of ruins the fun. There's like points against this and points for this. I mean, it is fun playing casual games with your friends. I mean, that's cool. What better than to sit down with some starter decks and just play some really like clown fiesta games. On the other hand, I think being competitive in games is extremely rewarding. It's rewarding to put in the time and the energy to actually try to build a better deck and then go to tournaments and see it be successful. So I don't think that it's necessarily the best way to play Yu-Gi-Oh, but it is a way to play Yu-Gi-Oh in a way that a lot of people enjoy. I think that as someone that plays more competitive than casual, I would say that in general I do have more fun actually putting in the effort to try to make my deck as good as possible, taking it to a tournament and seeing if my energy paid off, versus just sitting down with pre-made starter decks or just sort of these decks that are just 40 random cards and playing those. Even though those matches can be fun from time to time, they're just not as rewarding in terms of long-term play. I don't know if I could just play casual Yu-Gi-Oh for like 10 years. I think I would just get bored because every game is just a crapshoot, whereas with competitive Yu-Gi-Oh it's always evolving and I can sort of change my deck to the way that I want it to be. Watt007 says Firewall Dragon should be at 3. That is a very controversial opinion, but I have some insider information that Watt is a Duel Links tuber, so I think his opinion might be a little off on there. Obviously, it's hard to explain to someone that only plays Duel Links why a card like Firewall Dragon is so powerful. I think just in general, Duel Links players always have trouble understanding how powerful Extra Deck is, because in Duel Links right now there are synchros, but not many top decks are using them. We obviously see Blue Eyes using some synchros, but that's not even what they're trying to do. They're trying to just OTK you with Blue Eyes and Cosmo Brain. So I think it's really interesting seeing Duel Links players, obviously his comment's probably just a joke, but even then I think it's interesting to see Duel Links players underestimating how strong the Extra Deck is and the TCG because they haven't actually played with a lot of Extra Deck monsters in Duel Links. Dragon Rulers could come back because they don't spam enough to Extra Link and they don't stun. Pretty controversial opinion. Obviously, we know that the OCG recently got Tempest back, and it seems to not be doing anything, but I think it's hard to imagine Dragon Rulers as just like one single Dragon Ruler in a vacuum. I think when I was talking about Dragon Rulers not coming back, I was more referring to if all 4 of them came back at 1 copy per deck. And I would implore you to sort of check out the fact that Dragon Rulers are level 7, and therefore they can make Galaxy Tomahawk, which is actually pretty good at sort of facilitating extra linking plays, or FTKs, as we're seeing with the current forms of Danger Dark World. Tomahawk is an incredibly powerful card with link summoning, just because the tokens are so much more valuable than they ever have been, even when you were synchro summoning with those tokens. I don't think that's nearly as much value as you get from link climbing with those tokens. So I would think that even though Dragon Rulers maybe can't like always FTK, it's really dangerous just to have cards that are so easily summonable, as well as cards that are just so ridiculously versatile. But I don't know, I'll hear what you guys have to say about that. Can the Dragon Rulers come back? Are they fair enough at this point? Can we just get one of them back? I thought I saw someone talking about what if we got like Blaster back while OCG has Tempest. That could be maybe interesting, but in terms of all 4 of them coming back, I don't know if that's actually if we're too far past Dragon Wars to actually have a good look on what that would be. Obviously, Fairy Tail Snow being a +5 is pretty crazy, and things like Omega, while they are limited, are still very powerful in combination with the Dragon Rulers. Despite being extremely sacky, that Grasslook Screener was healthy for the game. I agree and I disagree with your opinion. I think that's why it's so controversial. A lot of people really did like that Grasslook Screener, and I think it feels really good to resolve that card. It doesn't feel good to have that card resolved against you. I know there are other cards in this game like Gumblar that also don't feel good when your opponent activates them, and those shouldn't be in the game either. But just in general, I think my favorite thing about that Grasslook Screener, even though I didn't really like the card and didn't play the card in a lot of decks, is that it made deck building interesting. I think cards like that and cards like Pot of Desires, which came out just a couple sets before that Grasslook Screener, are really cool because they force people to think about decks in a new way. I mean, that sort of 6 months period where we had both those cards released was really crazy for deck building. Nowadays, we don't think about it so often, but for many years, everyone just played 40 card decks with 3 Upstart Goblins, and even if you weren't playing Upstart Goblin, you were just playing a 40 card deck. And I think what Pot of Desires and that Grasslook Screener really did is help people actually see that you don't have to always play 40 cards. Sometimes you can play 60 cards, sometimes you can play 50 cards, sometimes you can just play 43 or 44 with Pot of Desires. All sorts of new deck building ideas got opened up because of that Grasslook Screener and Pot of Desires, and that's what I personally really like about that card, not so much having that card used against me though. If your favorite deck was worthy of bringing to tournaments, it'd be the next Cancer, and while this is a pretty harsh statement, I agree with it actually. I think a lot of people don't understand what you're saying, but when I think people think of their rogue strategies and they ask for them to get more support, they're not asking for them to get so much support that other people play them, even though that's what those decks require to be good. A fantastic, oh my gosh, like the best example of this is Spirals. Do you know how many fans of Spirals there were before Double Helix came out? So many YouTubing channels were playing that deck as like a fun rogue deck, and then as soon as Double Helix comes out, as soon as the deck becomes meta, they drop it because they don't want to play meta, even though the deck got the support that they were asking for that actually helped the strategy become good. People just want to play their favorite deck at full power, but also have no one else play that strategy. And I think that sort of comes along the lines of when I say like people think that they always have the secret sauce that makes their deck good. They just want to be the only one to play that strategy. People really hate, especially players that aren't as competitive, when their favorite decks suddenly become the meta deck because now they're just another meta sheep or whatever. And I think I agree with you. I don't know if everyone else would though. And lastly, Double Summon is a good one of in Trickstar. I don't think that this is that far off. Chain Summoning was played in early builds of Trickstar, and Nightmare Goblin was extremely effective in that strategy. The problem with Double Summon, as I've talked about a couple times like a year ago, is that it doesn't do anything by itself, and a lot of the times it can just be a dead draw. It's a card that's only good when you already have your engine going, and if your engine's already going, you're probably in a winning position anyway. Double Summon seems more just like a win more card, and when you're building a strategy, you really want to try to minimize the win more cards that you're playing, because if you're already winning, do you need to win more? No, you should try to help it out the times when you don't actually draw the late stage. You don't actually draw like Candina. In the case of Double Summon, it's only good when you're already able to summon multiple Candinas in one turn or multiple Trickstar monsters in one turn, just to try to get those extra searches. With Double Summon, maybe isn't good for the longevity of a longer tournament. Anyway though, hope you guys enjoyed today's video. I know know this is kind of a different style of video, but I had a lot of fun comments, and if you want to check out all of them, they'll be on my Twitter page. I'll even pin it when this video goes up, so you guys can kind of take a look at what other people are posting as controversial comments, because obviously I couldn't possibly read all of them in one video. But thank you so much for watching. I'll see you later. Goodbye.